Rick Grenell joining us now, our Senior Advisor for Foreign Policy and National Security. Rick, I want to jump to this because it's affecting everybody here in the United States too, because when now that we are no longer American energy independent and we're not an exporter of energy and gas, this also is hurting our allies. And we've seen this move that you wanted to flag for our audience today, that their energy giant Gazprom has halted gas supplies to Bulgaria and Poland they say for failing to pay for gas in rubles. But I think we can read between the lines there and realize they're beginning to punish countries and then not providing them natural gas. And America can't step up, Rick, and provide it because we're not a net exporter anymore.
And let's add a layer on what we talked about yesterday. Remember that we told the audience that the Biden administration was trying to keep the Germans buying Russian gas and oil. And now what we see today is that the Russians are cutting off Poland and Bulgaria. Now, what that means is they're not cutting off the Germans. The Biden administration is working to make sure that the Germans continue to purchase oil and gas from Russia. And one has to ask, why is it that Germany, which purchases way more energy from Russia, why do they get to continue while other countries like Poland and Bulgaria are being cut off by the Russians? Now, the Biden administration should be screaming at the top of their lungs about this, but instead they are secretly telling the Germans keep buying to not impact the global price of oil, at least through the midterm elections. So we've got a lot of politics being played by the Biden administration. I think Jennifer Granholm, former Michigan governor who is the Secretary of Energy, needs to answer some very tough questions. She's certainly not going to get these tough questions from the Washington, D.C. press corps. But our Republican members of Congress need to step up and ask some really tough questions of the Secretary of Energy. What's going on?
Here's the follow-up on that, Rick, and that is if you look at the situation as it's unfolding right now, in we're going to do this next segment, in Russia and Ukraine and the whole battle that's going on there. I'm trying to figure out what is the end game here, other than and trying to avoid World War III.
The end game is power. It's power for the Biden administration to stay in power, to keep at least the House or the Senate, to appease the public of not having increased gas prices, pump prices, and continue to blame Putin. Remember, they've said It's the Putin price hike. And also remember that we know that Barack Obama told the Russian leader many years ago when he was the president, just give me a little flexibility on the policy until I get through the election.
Yep.
Once I'm elected, then I can change the policy. This is the Obama-Biden strategy.
Yeah, by the way, if it was Donald Trump that said that, they would have impeached him. And Barack Obama says it, and they say, well, that wasn't such a bad thing. Hey, Rick, we've been telling people the first half of this broadcast, we've been very concerned about what's going on the border, but we've also talked about the voting issue. People need to understand how important it is to vote. Go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah, let's take Sandra's call from Minnesota on line one. Hey, Sandra, welcome to Seculo. You're on the air.
Hi, Jordan. Thank you for taking my call today.
Thanks for calling.
My question for you and your dad, Jay, is that, okay, he's stressing for us to vote. However, how are we guaranteed that our voting machines still aren't rigged to steal this election?
Well, let me ask you this question. So I'm going to have Rick do this too. First of all, there's been a lot of work on voter integrity. So there's been a lot of that's gone on in the last year and a half since the election, and a lot more is going on going forward. There was, the evidence on voting machine irregularities just wasn't there, to be blunt. Okay, I think what happened was the old-fashioned way. Ballots, these mail-in ballots were outrageous. These drop boxes were outrageous. The ballot harvesting is outrageous. But let me tell you something. Sandra, the alternative is you do nothing. And the alternative when you do that, Rick, if you do nothing, is we surrender the country. And we can't do that.
Yeah. Look, I've done a lot of international election monitoring. And the reality is one of the best ways are eyes and video on the counters, on people who are counting the ballots. we've struggled, to be honest, when we would go out and say, who wants to go to the polls, who wants to watch, who wants to go inside and count for the conservative side. And we've struggled to have people volunteer. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think we're going to have a whole bunch of mama bears with their cell phones showing up and saying, you're not counting that twice. You're not going to use that ballot. What are you doing by transferring this or that? I think now we're going to have the eyes. We're going to have the attention. And like you said, Jay, we have been concentrating on the election integrity issue, trying to shrink the voter rolls of all of the violations that are currently there. Dead people, residency violators, all of the old information needs to be purged, because that's how they create this chaos of a whole bunch of ballots out there. Everybody knows you're getting 9-10 ballots at apartment complexes for one
Jordan
apartment.
brought him in. Rick Jordan brought him in during the last election.
Yeah, it's tons of live ballots. I lived in 3 places in the last 5-6 years, and had voted in those places. So I was getting live ballots, not requests.
You don't need a machine to make that messy.
So there was an opportunity for so much bad activity. But I think, Sandra, what you've got to take away is what Rick just said. One, none of it matters if you don't show up and vote. So that's the first thing you got to do. 2, we have to do a better job, and I think we will. I agree with Rick. I think more people are going to be encouraged to volunteer on Election Day. And it's not just about Election Day anymore, because there's so much early voting that's allowed, to make sure we've got poll watchers in key locations that are connected to a bigger structure, who know how to report problems, and then can get in touch with a legal team who can then come down and figure out if they need to file something in court. That is the way it has to work. But the RNC cannot buy that many people with that many. You've got to have volunteers that care deeply enough about the election that they will spend their personal time and organize their schedule to do that job of poll watching, and to make sure they know who to contact if they think there's been a problem. And Rick, like you said, internationally, the U.S. does this all over the country, all over the world. So it's something the Republican Party can do. The other side has been doing it for decades.
One point I'd like to just add to Sandra's important call, and I think it's something that we hear regularly and we need to keep thinking about, is that the conservatives, the Republican Party, has moved to not rely on volunteer lawyers anymore. We have to pay the lawyers. You can't have a lawyer that's just gonna, maybe give you a couple hours on Thursday. You need to have somebody who works for the organization that will show up and fight. And so that is a positive. We've moved in that direction. We've had to raise a lot of money. It's very expensive to do.
Yep.
But I've been a big advocate for not having volunteer lawyers.
No, I think what happened in 2016, the last election cycle in 2020 was that you had the typical networks of Republican lawyers, but these were highly complicated filings that needed to be made, like in 1 hour. And what we saw was a lot of cases get tossed out on technicalities.
Yeah, procedurally
so
not right.
They weren't the right, so they were not necessarily bad lawyers, but they were election lawyers. They were Republican lawyers. They weren't experts in election law. The judge would get the filing, and they couldn't even go past the filing because it was wrong. And then by the time that was wrong, you didn't even have time to refile. That final question, too, the fact that you've got Mayorkas today blaming Donald Trump for the border crisis. I mean, literally he's blaming Trump and Congress, which Congress has authorized a lot. I mean, but the fact that they're blaming Donald Trump and the Trump voters for the crisis is just, to me, it is so, it just makes me so angry, because things were going in the right direction, and that was good for people.
Yeah, it's spectacularly political for Mayorkas to somehow blame Donald Trump. Everybody knows this is not true. Everybody knows we had the border completely closed. We were dealing with individuals, and it's now skyrocketed into a crisis. And it's bipartisan concern. I see Democrats all over, and including on border states of Arizona, California, New Mexico. We've got Democrats and independents that are very concerned about what is happening. Mayorkas is a total failure, and Republicans need to act quickly. This is a border. This is about safety and security and national security.
All right, Rick, as always, we appreciate your commentary on all of these issues. And Rick is front and center of this, too. He's running a super PAC for the Trump team. I mean, so he knows the kind of investments that need to be made to make sure we want to make sure all of you get out and vote. That's priority one. Priority two is volunteer if you can to help these voter integrity efforts.